Theories about the origin of life are many and various. Most of them seem to be complicated. There is, however, one theory that is unbelievably simple. At least it is simple if it's explained correctly. That theory is the theory of evolution. There is also a great deal of evidence to support it, and it's considered by everyone in the scientific community to be established science. However, it isn't always explained very well. What I remember from school is that it was taught badly. I won't go into the details of why that was, but I do remember I was annoyed and unhappy about some of the things I'd been told. That confusion in my mind persisted until I'd read enough and learned enough to finally understand the process. Perhaps if I'd simply gone away and read Charles Darwin's book instead of listening to people that didn't know what they were talking about, I would have been a lot less confused. But I digress. I think evolution is best explained as a completely abstract process. All of the incredible diversity of life we see in the world is the result of it. The idea is that a long time ago the first living thing came into being. Chemical processes created it. There existed a mixture of different chemicals and molecules that were constantly changing and reacting with each other. Eventually, within this mixture there emerged a collection of molecules that were in some way self-contained and separate from the rest. An example of this happening on a much larger scale is the giant red spot we see on the surface of Jupiter. The surface of Jupiter is just like our atmosphere. It's made up of different gases. The gases in the atmosphere are always in motion, but the red spot has to some extent become protected and independent from its surroundings. The first living thing would have been similar to the red spot in this respect, but obviously it was much smaller. That first living thing was not just a self-contained collection of chemicals though. There was something else that made it different. The arrangement of molecules within it gave it the ability to reproduce. There was nothing fundamentally special about this ability though. It was just a natural consequence of how the molecules were arranged and the laws of chemistry. So the first living thing probably didn't have very much in terms of unique behaviour, but it did make copies of itself. In order to reproduce, it also had to feed, or to absorb chemicals from the environment, but it had that ability too. Reproduction is a bit like making a cake. You need a recipe of the ingredients, and then you need to find those ingredients, and finally you need to assemble them into the cake. Chemistry, and what we now call biology, are capable of doing all these things. In time, one of those tiny living organisms became numerous and spread. You can still see this sort of thing in the oceans today. There's lots and lots of algae in the world's oceans, for example. I've shown a slide of this because although it is important to think of reproduction as an abstract idea driven by chemical processes, it is also good to see it happening in practice with our own eyes. What's really interesting though, is that when a living thing reproduces, it's possible that the new life will be different from its creator. The way that this happens is not important, but it is generally assumed to happen because the mechanism by which reproduction occurs is not perfect. The point is that changes in living things can happen, and that if these changes are permanent, then the descendants will also be different from the original organism. At this point we can stop and look at evolution in another way. We can simply look at it as numbers. Number 1. The first reproducing living organism comes into existence. Soon there are many of them. Number 2. By chance, one of them becomes different from the others. Soon there are many of them too. Number 3. Another change results in organism number 3 coming into existence. Number 4. Another change results in a different organism again. Then there's number 5, number 6, etc., etc., so on and so on, ad infinitum. This is the reason why people sometimes say that evolution is an unguided process. There is no purpose, except infinite creativity. There is, in principle, no limit to the diversity of life that evolution can create. However, this isn't the whole picture. There are 2 additional components. The first one is simply that the changes can result in a living thing that doesn't function and cannot actually survive or reproduce. In a recent interview, Stephen Fry was asked what he would say to God. His reply was something like, "Bone cancer in children? How does that work?" Well, the answer is it doesn't work. Seems likely that organisms number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and perhaps many more fell into this category. Mother Nature has relentless energy though, and she keeps making new and different living things, whether they function or not. In addition, They might be successful living things, but perhaps they simply get wiped out by some natural disaster. The dinosaurs, for example, were perfectly functional living things, but they couldn't survive in the conditions on Earth after a large meteorite hit us. The second one is that I mentioned organisms need to feed in order to reproduce. They also need to find shelter, because the environment can often be harsh enough to kill them. So they need to have behaviours that allow them to do both of these things effectively. This is where the changes that are happening to create new living organisms really matter. These changes will affect the behaviour of the organism. So let's say we have 3 organisms, all of which are functional and can reproduce. However, one of them is more efficient at absorbing food. One of them moves faster than the others, but it's actually less efficient at absorbing food. The third one is even more inefficient at gathering food, and it moves slowly too. However, let's say the last one is tougher. It can survive in colder temperatures. Which one of these organisms will be more successful? Well, the answer is it depends. If you think about this for a minute, you'll conclude that the diversity of life is a really good thing. It means that life has a way to deal with an unknown and changing environment. For exactly the same reason, we often talk about and support diversity in our society. We want to have people with different skills and backgrounds because we value that diversity. Nobody knows what skills, opinions and approaches to life we'll need in the future, so it's good to have as many as possible. However, when it comes down to it, what really matters is that you actually have some abilities or attributes that work. All that matters is that whatever you do, it has to work. This is natural selection. If other living things are better than you are, you'd better do something about it, and get better yourself, or find a different environment where your own unique skills and abilities are more suitable to the conditions. As Richard Dawkins put it in The God Delusion, natural selection works because it is a cumulative one-way street to improvement. Evolution is really a very simple theory. It is infinite creativity combined with a mechanism for selecting strategies that work. Given difficult, even hostile conditions, ideas that work better than others have more chance of surviving to the next generation. This is life.